Good evening from Netherlands. We're back to Coaching and Mentoring Festival with the umbrella well-being. It is my pleasure to um, open up tonight a series of conversation with my former colleague and friend Cheryl Muller about sleep and sleep coaching. Hi, Cheryl.
Hey, Alina. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for accepting my invitation to explore this important topic. I have to say that in the past, together with Luisa Stefan, we had a series dedicated to well-being, and we have explored, let's say, what is well-being in the quadrant, so to speak, the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual well-being. And knowing that you have directed your steps and you are going to let us know what drove you to sleep coaching, I
Mhm.
thought it's a very interesting topic to spend some time looking at sleep because it is many times overlooked or downplayed in importance. We tend to learn about how to manage stress, how to manage time. There's many courses, materials about nutrition, about physical exercise, even hydration, but somehow sleep, yeah, it's natural, of course, it's occurring, we just let it be. And yes, many times we don't know how to manage or what is good sleep or what maybe
Mhm.
when to be aware that we need to take some measures or pay attention more to this aspect.
Indeed.
And it is my pleasure to have you here in this journey. And maybe it is good to mention that these conversations are going to be every Thursday, the first Thursday in the month, from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8 on the Romanian time, because Coaching and Mentoring Festival does address a large audience which is in Romania.
Mhm.
And yes, we hope that people can join us in this conversation. And yeah, I would like to invite you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for this warm introduction, Alina, and for inviting me to be a part of this journey on co-hosting a series on the topic of sleep and how this is related to well-being as a whole. So, thank you for that opportunity. And I'm really looking forward to be able to use this platform together with you to um, increase the awareness and inform and share information on how much impact good sleep actually has and what the short term and long term impact can be, but also when you don't have good quality sleep or sufficient sleep. So I'm really looking forward to start that journey with you.
Well,
Yeah.
we're both excited, and maybe people know me already. They
Mhm.
see me, so we're both based in Netherlands. I've been living here for 15 years. I am a coach. I'm a psychologist, and I would say that as a coach, I coach for balance, and for me, there is an equal sign between well-being. Well-being is balance for me. And I would like to, yeah, maybe invite you to tell a little bit about yourself.
About myself, well, so I've actually been a HR professional for around 15 years, and have really enjoyed working with people as such. And I started this after having finished my studies in business economics. So so that was quite interesting having that background to then start working with people, because I always saw people as the um, most interesting factor within business, and it being the biggest cost factor usually within businesses. And it was around 2 years ago in 2020 that I came across this crossroad, and I had to choose whether I would continue with human resources or if I wanted to do something else. And around that same time, I got very inspired by this book, Why We Sleep, by this professor in neuroscience, Matthew Walker. And the message that I got from that book is how little I actually knew about sleep in general, but the short term and long term effects of it, and how it affects everything within the physical, the mental, the emotional side of us. And I was so flabbergasted at um, how this topic actually is so much more than I ever thought it was. I don't know. It kind of lit this fire within me to share it and to continue with this. And I happened to from there search to get myself trained and educated in order to help people with improving their own difficulties with sleep.
Right. Well, that sounds very interesting. I happen to know that you also have a bit. Well, you paid attention, let's say, when you look back, because this is
Mhm.
how it happens. We are drawn sometimes into professional
Yes,
changes, of the path, of the career path, because something resonates with us. And
exactly.
I'm curious how this topic of sleep resonated
How
with you
indeed.
along the way.
Well, and when I was thinking further, having been in HR for such a long time, one of the topics that has always been quite high up in the agenda is keeping the absenteeism of employees as low as possible, because that would show how how healthy your workforce force is. And um, during conversations within earlier positions that I had, it really came about how the things that people experience, the reasons for getting ill, and how sleep basically also got or could be a consequence of that, actually having less or bad sleep, so to say. Yeah. So that's also uh, how it kind of touched it in a bit.
Well, everything starts with an idea, a desire, a passion, right?
Indeed.
So, what we both want to say is that our series of conversations, well, we are not experts into anything. And actually, in order, what is an expert? In order to become an expert, everything
Exactly.
starts with an interest, right? And then you gain knowledge, you read more, you get trained, you talk about it, you bring
Completely
people
agree.
together, right?
Yes.
So, as we said, this the intention of this series is not, of
Mhm.
course, to replace, to make any medical recommendation. No,
No,
it is more a space of reflection where we'd like to bring the light of on this important topic
indeed.
aspect of our life that we do not consider, and of our life as human beings, adults, but also children,
Definitely.
and also pets, as we will see very soon, because one of this we tend to have, whether we are the adults or we have
Exactly.
children or we
Yeah.
have pets. And so the intention of this series is just to raise awareness, engage in conversations about sleep, brief some knowledge that we
Yeah.
have. And with this, I want to point out to the people that are listening to us, or seeing us live, or maybe later, that to remind them that they can engage with us and leave questions or comments,
Mhm.
whether they are in watching us from Facebook or LinkedIn, they can do that with the comments line from LinkedIn and Facebook, because we will be able to see it. And if there are questions or comments also for later, please feel free to do that, and we will gladly share more resources or answer with the information that we have. And we
Mm,
also want to say that on some topics we don't know, but when we don't know, we go and research, because that is the beauty of learning.
definitely. And then we'll come back.
And then we come back, indeed. So this journey we like to start, we wanted to approach sleep, but also with the season, right? So what was
Correct.
when we start, when we thought of where we opened the series, we said, well, we have a major thing, which is the daylight saving.
Indeed.
And this is where we wanted to address, what is the impact of the daylight saving time on sleep. And
Indeed.
this is where our journey starts. And we said that the intention was to cover three topics, and the first one
Mhm.
was the impact of
Yep.
this daylight saving on our sleep. And here I'm going to invite Cher to take us a little bit through the aspects that you wanted to mention.
Well, that sounds good. But I'm also very interested in your story about the holiday that you had last week, because you happened to mention that you went to Portugal with the family. And so I happen to think that you actually last week already kind of got adjusted to the time that we are now in the Netherlands. Um, so I wanted to check with you, like what things did you actually experience when being there, and then kind of coming back to the Netherlands, because that would be a nice point
Practical
from
aspect, right?
exactly instead of
Yeah. So,
yeah.
indeed, if we talk about the daylight saving,
Hmm.
I think this has been in place for some time. And actually, I wanted to mention that there are now bills, or there is a bill that is being passed in US to actually renounce to this change of time. I wanted to briefly say that, because you and I looked on this topic before I go to the my experience. The daylight saving, it is actually observed in US and in Europe, but funny enough, it is a week difference, right? So US will
Correct.
change
Yeah.
the this Sunday, that is
This
the coming
weekend,
Sunday, yeah.
indeed.
And it is not observed mostly in Asia, neither in Africa,
Correct.
only in partially in South America, or in the southern part, like Paraguay and Chile, and also in Australia. It is observed, but
Indeed.
they have it the other way around.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
they do it October, April,
Agree.
but they have it the other way around. Obviously, they are in the southern hemisphere. So
Yeah.
we thought it is like, did you know that? Because we didn't. So when we researched,
Yeah.
we thought that that's a nice thing to mention. And also
Indeed.
the fact that I think both in Europe and in US, they're trying to change that.
Correct.
Um,
And if I
and
may add something, is that in the US, the proposal seems to be to have daylight saving time, or what we would call here the summertime, be the standard in the United States, whereas in Europe, the proposal is to have the standard or winter time to become the permanent one. Um, but there's been a lot of delays of having this bill in Europe be agreed to. I believe it's also been um, not put on the agenda of the European Union by the president multiple times, and yeah, multiple members of the EU have just mentioned that they don't have sufficient time, or haven't had sufficient time, to really check with their population, with the businesses, what the impact really is going to be, if that will be the permanent time zone to go forward in. So that's unfortunately means that we'll be changing twice per year still until this further notice. Yeah.
Yes, and well, coming back to my story about which maybe illustrates the impact of the time change on sleep. Yes, indeed, we traveled for the school vacation last week
Hmm.
to Portugal, and Portugal has 1 hour difference. It is on the GMT, so like the same as UK. And first, it took us a bit to adjust because for us and the children to adjust with the time going to bed, and waking
Yeah.
up, because obviously our bodies were feeling um, the time zone from the Netherlands, and then coming back, flying back, the time change exactly during the night of us traveling. So
Before
we had
traveling
the
back,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. So we had the flight
Wow.
in the morning,
Hmm.
and we actually we were concerned if we're going to make it or not, which
Hmm.
actually as an impact of our sleep was that you had some anxiety because you never know how it goes forward, backwards,
Of course.
and just to be in time. So it created a worry, so to speak. And of course, it impacted the quality and the quantity of sleep.
I can
But
imagine. Yeah.
yes, but other than that, I'll be curious, what you can add to our experience.
Definitely. Well, one of the things that gets disrupted when the clock changes, whether it's backward or forward, is that the biological clock actually gets a little bit of a blow, so to say. And your circadian rhythm is the 24-hour cycle of your biological clock, and it ensures that all the different functions are tuned with the right timing during the day. So you can imagine if there's a change, even if it's just 1 hour, that your whole system kind of goes a little bit out of whack. And the things that you usually tend to see this with is getting sleepier. For example, well, I'm going to talk about the winter time now, but getting a bit sleepier earlier, getting hungry a bit earlier because now it's 7:15 in Romania, but last week it was 8:15 at this time, um, and you're also getting a bit hungry earlier because of that. So you can imagine all the functions within your body having to adjust to this new time. Um, and the one thing that our brain loves is regularity, consistency. So to then have this change, yeah, gives this whole disruption, so to say. And sleep is something neurological, so you can imagine how that indeed then impacts. But one of the things that people tend to experience with especially the fall, winter time, and the winter months, there's less daylight. People feel easily tired, or getting a bit more sluggish, feeling a bit more moody. All these things do tend to be very typical for this um, season or the winter months that we're going into. Yeah.
And I think to that, you can look on. There are some statistics, about the impact, and I think you were
Yeah.
mentioning something about strokes and traffic accidents. What can you say about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, just an interesting something to know is that the first day after the winter time kicks in, there seems to be a 21% decrease in traffic accidents and in strokes, just because on average, the people tend to gain 1 hour extra of sleep. In spring, when we get into daylight savings time, you actually see the opposite because of the 1 hour less of sleep that people get. Yeah, so
So
that's
actually, it
quite
it is
critical.
measurable, that it has an impact
Yeah,
on
indeed.
what is happening, in our the way we are able to react. And also, so this is health and attention, I would say, because
Oh,
traffic is
definitely. Yeah.
about
But just to show
attention.
how one less or one more hour can have such an impact on how alert we are, how quickly we are in responding and making the right decisions. Yeah.
Right. And of course, it is also, I'm wondering in terms of jet lag for people that are traveling
Mhm.
during such a period
Like
of time. How is
like
that?
you had, of course, last weekend.
Yes, I
Well,
think,
actually, this tiredness and the effects that you can experience because of the change in time or the change of clocks is actually called a mini jet lag because, like a regular jet lag, um, your body would travel towards or through multiple time zones faster than your normal cycle would have. And this 1 hour difference does give this mini effect as well as a jet lag would. Yeah, indeed.
okay, never thought that if we have a mini jet lag if we
Yeah,
change the hour, but so
yeah,
it seems.
exactly.
Um, Anything else that you would like to share on this impact this can
Well,
have?
what I would like to share still are maybe some tips on how you can deal with that, if that would be interesting. Um, and one thing that is very key is to really keep to your consistent day and sleep rhythm. Uh, and what I mean with that is going to bed and waking up approximately around the same time. And I happened to mention earlier already how the brain loves regularity. And the more consistent you are in doing that, the easier it becomes um, to fall asleep more naturally, to to have the energy during the day that you need. So that's definitely one thing I can mention. Because the days are becoming darker and having less daylight, it's so important to also get as much natural daylight if you can, and especially in the morning, tends to be the best. There's actually also more blue in the light in the morning, which helps to stop the melatonin production through the sunlight getting into your eyes. And a second thing is that it really helps you to, or it actually tells your body, it's time to wake up. So if you ever feel a bit more sluggish or a bit more tired, get out there and enjoy the fresh air, but also have that daylight get into your system. Yeah. Other tips that you can use are, and that's something that was handy prior to the change of the clock, is to already set the clocks in the new time already, because it helps just yourself to get into it quicker the next day. And another one is exercising also tends to help to just give you more energy, give you a boost. Uh, when you exercise, you also release endorphins, which can also help with the moodiness or feeling a bit low. Yeah. So those
And for
are main
Yeah, and
things.
for the
Yeah.
ones that don't necessarily have time or the possibility to
Hmm.
go to gym, I
Yes,
think a brisk walk, I would say, it's
is
also
already
very
very helpful.
yes, it's very
Definitely.
helpful. I mean, even 10 minutes of brisk walk,
Hmm.
um, it will do wonders by being outside in nature, by having the light, but also by putting, doing the movement. And even
Indeed.
I think it's preferable to do it outside. You can also do it inside. I mean,
Yes.
I think there are some good exercises, even if you
That
lift
you can
yourself
do
and then
inside.
sit down, or have stairs, and you go multiple times, or there are all sorts of exercises, but just to be, it is the awareness of activating a little bit more.
Correct. Yeah. I
And
actually was having a conversation with the mom of my daughter's friend, And she happened to mention to me, like, um, it's so interesting to see that if you are at the office a whole day without really going outside or having proper breaks, compared to perhaps maybe having a working day where you have appointments outside, you can cycle to them. Cycling meaning you're outside, getting into the daylight. She mentioned how much of a difference it felt, between the two scenarios. And how indeed just having those pauses or just being outside can really, um, yeah,
Boost.
make your working day end in a much more delightful way. Yeah.
Well, and of course, we are also parents. So, and you happen to have a pet. I don't have one, but
I have
what
a
was
dog, correct.
yeah, so I mean, what were some tips or some of the things that you have done
Mhm.
practically with your daughter and also with your dog to
Exactly.
kind of help them through this time?
Well, funny enough, actually, the tips that I would give for parents, especially with younger kids, I didn't really apply myself because my daughter has been going to sleep a bit later than I actually would have liked. But funny enough, by the time changing to an hour, getting to be an hour earlier, we kind of managed to get back to a bit of the old rhythm, so to say. But what I would normally advise is a couple of days prior to the change to already um, set the time that you want to bring your child to bed, like about 15 to 20 minutes later, so that by the time the clocks change, your child is already on the time of the new zone. So that would help the would help your child
Transition.
to get to transition to get adjusted in a more gradual way. And this would also be the same for when your child goes for naps during the day or going out for activities. Yeah, and also waking up in the morning.
And
Indeed.
of course, at this time it is 15 minutes later, and
Yeah,
in the spring it is
15
15
minutes
minutes
earlier.
earlier. Exactly.
Correct. Yes.
When the time, so when you know that it's coming,
Yeah,
the week prior, it
indeed.
just try to talk everyone through and say, okay, let's aim for it, let's do 15 minutes. It's a challenge, it's a family challenge. Let's get
Well,
15 minutes earlier or later, so
indeed.
then we get there with the time and we don't observe
Correct.
many differences.
But if I would ask my daughter, oh, she'd love to always be going to bed later rather than earlier. So I didn't do it with hers because she was already kind of way too long on the new time zone. Yeah.
Yes, and how about pets?
Well, for pets, it kind of goes a bit the same way, um, but slightly different. And I only looked at dogs and cats for our conversation. So dogs tend to be more um, prone or more focused on their owner. So if the owner tends to be a bit more out of rhythm or a bit more distressed following this change, then you would see it a bit in the behavior or just the way the dog would feel. Um, but I would suggest the same thing as in with regards to going out for walks, going or giving feeding times, to also gradually change it so that by the time the clocks change, your pet has actually gradually transitioned into the new time as such. Cats are also focused on their owner, but are more led by daylight, so there, I believe having them more outside tends to be having a bit more of an effect on them. But the same goes there with regards to feeding time. Perhaps if you do other activities with your cat, to kind of gradually change it to the new time.
Okay, well, that was interesting. I never thought that.
I did read that I think rabbits and what's the other one called? Hamsters. They don't have as much effect by it. Yeah. Yes,
They
I guess
sleep as much throughout.
so. I guess it's more, maybe that they would feel it when feeding times might be slightly different, but they wouldn't show as much disruption as maybe dogs and cats would. Yeah.
Well, and then we also intended to talk about the difference
Hmm.
between being tired and being sleeping.
Correct. So tired is actually when you have a lack of energy and when you feel physically, mentally, emotionally exhausted. And if you look at sleepy, sleepy is the urge to want to sleep. And with that, sleep pressure is something that really impacts that. And sleep pressure is something that you start building from the moment that you wake up until you go to bed.
What do
Uh,
you mean with sleep pressure?
Sleep pressure, that's kind of it's the pressure or the urge of wanting to go to sleep. That's basically
Oh,
the
so
sleep pressure.
it's like when you can't keep your eye open,
Oh, that's when
right?
you indeed can't keep your eyes open, when you start yawning. That's kind of how you can see the difference between the two. And one thing that people get a bit confused about is that they think their tiredness is sleepiness. So, what happens sometimes is that people being tired tend to go to bed maybe slightly earlier than their usual time would be. And in sometimes not not being able to fall asleep, or if they have slept, to then maybe not fall asleep after they had woken up during the night. Yeah.
Okay. And what can determine this? So if you put yourself in
Hmm.
bed, so you're tired, but you're not sleepy.
Well, I would definitely look at the signs of sleepiness, being, do you feel like you're starting to yawn? And do you see or do you feel like you can't keep your eyes open? Another thing that happens or can happen is that you can't seem to organize your thoughts anymore. And sometimes that can feel so weird, as in, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm thinking or what I wanted to say, but it's actually a very natural way of to starting to unwind and to make yourself ready to be able to to go to bed in the best way possible.
Okay. Well, I think that's quite interesting because
Mhm.
I never thought about this difference between being
Yeah.
tired and being sleepy.
Indeed.
Although I found myself that there were indeed moments when maybe I would have guests and I would have somebody talking. And at some point, I found myself that I was drifting away and literally I couldn't follow anymore. And my eyes would, you know, like
Yeah.
close. And yeah, that's the moment when it's like, okay, if I'm sitting here, I'm
Exactly,
trying
and
to
that's
go.
the time that you actually, it would be preferable to then go to sleep. But of course, depending on where you are in or in what setting you are, you don't always have that opportunity. But what sometimes can also happen is that you go beyond this phase of sleepiness and then become slightly too aware or too alert afterwards. And then it can become a bit more difficult to get to that sleepy stage or phase again. Yeah.
I have to say, for me, I do feel the
Mhm.
difference, of the hour change.
Mhm.
So I, the way I address this, I try to be in bed earlier, and I think I also have feel the fact that indeed we have less daylight and more exposure to artificial light.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there's any impact of that is disrupting our sleep with having more artificial light.
I would say yes, but it usually tends to be a combination of things. So one thing can be artificial light, as in the multiple screens that we have, whether it's television, our mobiles, our laptops. Um, but it the second thing that also affects it is what we actually do with this artificial light. So if it is that we are still working, or if we're scrolling through our social media channels, um, or if we're perhaps gaming, then these things can keep us too alert. And by being alert, it will also make it more difficult to become in a more relaxed state. Also, with the artificial light for the melatonin to start being produced. Yeah, so these things definitely have a negative impact on if we want to be able to sleep well.
Well, and I think that is something that we want to maybe leave our audience, because um,
Mm-hmm.
it might be interesting if you hear a client, because this is a community of coaches and mentors, and
Yeah.
you might have a client that, okay, comes with other topics, but then you notice that they are tired, or you notice, or they're complaining of a lack of energy, and then you
Mm-hmm.
talk about sleep maybe.
Yeah.
And we are not touching about cultural differences in this
Mm-hmm.
conversation, but I know that in Romania there is maybe more of a habit to have a television maybe in each room, maybe to watch it. And I also know my mom-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
um, she kind of watches certain things, certain series, and that tends to, well, it gives light and it gives
Yeah.
exposure and it gives stimulation for the brain.
Yeah.
And then obviously that hour gets pushed more and more
Yeah.
in terms of sleep. And it is good to have this awareness,
Awareness, true.
maybe even when to close that. And the fact that indeed
Yeah.
melatonin, if you have a light next to your head and you also have the TV open
Yeah.
and all of those things, let's put it this way: it's going to be more difficult for the melatonin to be secreted, naturally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it's going to take longer to fall asleep. And maybe it's just something to consider,
You
not
consider.
only the screens, but also this aspects, and
Indeed.
also sleeping with the light on. And yeah.
And I guess it also depends on how bright the light is, because if it's in a dimmed phase or stage, it shouldn't matter too much. But it is nice to, if you do have a night routine of at some point unwinding, and it would be really nice to do that uh, about an hour before going to bed, but for some, maybe half an hour before going to bed.
Yeah, for
Um,
some
yeah,
maybe 1 hour and a half, because
exactly. Yeah,
we
depending
have
on
some active children, and we know it takes sometimes for some children,
to
who
get
are,
ready
yeah,
and to
who
get
are more energetic,
definitely. Yeah,
it will take longer to unwind, and then
yeah.
you just need to start earlier, the
That's
entire process.
definitely true. But I would like to make a distinction between television and the other screens, because if you compare them, the television tends to be at a much bigger distance from where you sit and from where you see. So that can tend to be less, um, having a less negative effect on going to sleep after that, compared to when you have your laptop or your mobile, which is very distant to your face. Yeah. And with television, I mean, some people love to relax with television. If you look or watch something that's very soothing or very relaxing, that there's no issue with that. But I can imagine if you're watching a Halloween movie or a very thrilling something that you might be more alert and more, yeah,
Wired.
energetic and more awake afterwards.
Yes, well, these are some ideas about the day life saving and the
Yeah,
sleep, and we hope that this was a bit insightful for the people that maybe
definitely.
have.
Yeah.
We thank the 1, 2, 3 people that were live with us, and um, what should we leave the people with?
Well, there's something that I would still like to add that I had forgotten in the tips that I mentioned is to really try also not to, especially for adults, to try and not take naps during the day. And that has to do with the sleep pressure that gets built up from the moment that you wake up. And if you take a nap, then of course that sleep pressure decreases as such. So it could be that there might not be sufficient of this by the time you actually do go to sleep at night, which can have, of course, its impact on the quality of your sleep. Yeah,
Okay, well, there we have it. We left some tips. We also looked a little bit on how it is impacting
indeed.
this change. And next time we are going to meet again on 1st of December, which
Mhm.
happens to be the National Day of Romania.
Oh, really?
And
Oh,
yes,
that's a holiday then.
it's going to be a celebration. And it is a holiday indeed, because it is a day off in Romania. And so on next time, we're going to talk a little bit about how sleep gets impacted by holidays. Yes,
Ooh,
because we're
interesting
going
topic.
towards Christmas, and on Christmas, and with this, it's going to be holidays, but it's going to be maybe traveling. So you have a new bed, or you have a new time zone,
Indeed.
or it's also the intake of foods and alcohol.
Alcohol,
So
correct?
yeah, so all of those things are going to be things that we are going to discuss about
Yep.
in our next conversation on 1st of December.
And perhaps
So
if anyone still has questions or perhaps questions for the next topic, please let us know.
yes, so thank you very much for watching us. Thank you, Cheryl, for doing this, taking the plunge and doing this series with me. And yes, let's enjoy the last month of autumn
Indeed.
and cuddling for our sleep.
Thank you so much, Alina, and it was lovely having have had our kickoff, so to say.
Yes. Have a lovely evening, everyone, and see you on 1st of December.
Bye, everyone.